In 1998, Marvel Comics embarked on an ambitious task, rebooting its most popular hero, Spider-Man. Following highly controversial storylines like the Clone Saga and a growing decline in sales, the company tasked writer-artist John Byrne to relaunch the web-slinger with an all-new origin story, told within the 13-issue series, Spider-Man Chapter 1. Running from October 1998 to August 1999, this comic aimed to refresh and update the character's original backstory, as told by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, by reimagining and reworking elements from the first 15 issues of Amazing Spider-Man, and serving as a launchpad to revitalize Spider-Man ahead of the new millennium. Instead though, Chapter 1 is a largely forgotten project. Those who do remember it though, often characterize it as misguided, convoluted, and inferior to both its 1960s predecessor and its more successful follow-up, Ultimate Spider-Man. And so in this video, I want to explore the history behind Spider-Man Chapter 1, discuss how it came to be and Byrne's vision for rebuilding Peter Parker's mythos, and why this 13-issue series remains one of the most polarizing Spider-Man stories ever put to print. Before we continue though, just a quick reminder to leave a like on this video if you enjoy it, and subscribe to Owen Likes Comics so you don't miss out on any future videos. The 1990s was a pretty turbulent decade for Spider-Man, from the launch of his fourth monthly title in 1990, written and drawn by Todd McFarlane, the rise to prominence of new characters like Venom, and the now beloved Spider-Man the Animated Series, which began airing in 1994, the web-slinger experienced several meteoric highs throughout the decade. However, the latter half of the 1990s was less kind to Peter Parker, with the controversial Clone Saga story, which ran from October 1994 to December 1996, ushering in a period of stagnation and disinterest among longtime fans. This, coupled with the speculator market's collapse in late 96 and Marvel teetering on the edge of bankruptcy, meant that by the summer of 1998, the company needed to take drastic action to revitalize its once most popular character. With Spider-Man's sales continuing to stagnate, Marvel decided to reset his entire line of monthly comics, cancelling each of his then ongoing series and relaunching them as part of a larger creative overhaul. This reset would see new writers and artists hired to work on existing books like Amazing Spider-Man, with that comic also being renumbered back to issue 1 for the first time since its creation, alongside a brand new limited series that would modernise and retell Spidey's origin for this new era. Given that at this point, Spider-Man's origin hadn't been retold since his first appearance in Amazing Fantasy 15, the notion of essentially replacing Lee and Ditko's original tale was a daunting task. However, Marvel eyed one specific creator who they believed could accomplish this: John Byrne. John Byrne had been a major part of Marvel Comics throughout the 1980s, making his name as an artist on books like Uncanny X-Men with Chris Claremont, as well as a writer on Fantastic Four and Sensational She-Hulk. More importantly, Byrne was hired by DC in 1986 to relaunch Superman in the aftermath of Crisis on Infinite Earths. As part of the company's first universe-wide reboot, Byrne wrote and drew The Man of Steel, a 6-issue limited series that retold Superman's origin and reintroduced the hero for this brand new continuity. Man of Steel was a massive commercial success at the time of its release, and played a big role in revitalizing both Superman and wider interest in DC Comics. Therefore, those at Marvel believed that Byrne was the logical choice to perform a similar task with Spider-Man, with editor Ralph Macchio approaching him about the project. While Byrne was keen on updating elements of Spider-Man's backstory, he was also insistent on retaining some elements of Lee and Ditko's original tale, with his series initially titled Twice Told Tales, using these classic stories as a loose template for his run, essentially updating and modernising them with some notable alterations. Speaking with Wizard magazine in July of 1998, John Byrne explained how this project was conceived, and how it would deviate from Peter Parker's classic origin, stating,
"Howard Mackie mentioned that Ralph Macchio had said he'd like to do some kind of a year one thing, and he tossed out my name. Wouldn't it be cool if we could get John? And one of the things that was appealing is that I'm not automatically associated with Spider-Man. I also have an advantage over Stan and Steve in that I know who's going to be in issue 10, issue 100, and issue 300. All those early Marvel stories were very chop, 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 because they were making it up as they went along. I'm able to actually get a sense of cohesion. Plus, they wanted it updated and tweaked a little bit. It's designed to be accessible to kids who haven't read Spider-Man before.
With Byrne on board, this revised origin would become the linchpin of Marvel's large-scale Spider-Man relaunch. It would begin in October 1998, with the other Spider-Man titles relaunching a month later, while Byrne was also announced as the new artist on Amazing Spider-Man, working with writer Howard Mackie to ensure that this series remained consistent with his new look origin. News of Marvel's plans to shake up Spider-Man broke in June of 1998, with Byrne's series being renamed Spider-Man Chapter 1. Despite the writer's proven track record with Superman and the Fantastic Four, this news divided the Marvel fanbase, with some noting the similarities between this endeavour and the ill-fated Heroes Reborn event, where Iron Man, Captain America and the Fantastic Four were rebooted within a pocket universe just 2 years earlier. Nevertheless, Byrne was committed to this bold retelling of Spider-Man's early years, and quickly got to work plotting out this new take on the friendly neighbourhood hero. This wouldn't be Marvel's first attempt at retelling the character's early days though. In 1995, the company launched Untold Tales of Spider-Man with writer Kurt Busiek, a series that aimed to tell new stories set in between the hero's early adventures. This title lasted for 26 issues and was well received by fans. However, in contrast, Byrne's project was far more ambitious, a wholesale redo of the Wallcrawler's backstory as if Spider-Man was a brand new invention, while still retaining and using the classic stories as an overall roadmap. It was decided that Chapter 1 would span 12 issues, with a special Zero issue published midway through its run. The title would not only showcase Peter's transformation into the friendly neighbourhood hero, but also introduce modernised takes on established villains like Dr. Octopus, Electro and the Chameleon. Published within the book's first issue, John Byrne penned an open letter to fans explaining why he and Marvel were rebooting Spidey's origin, stating that,
"Why reboot Spider-Man in this fashion? What was wrong with the classic tales as told by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko those many years ago? A simple reason really, to open Spider-Man to a new generation of readers, a generation that might be put off by high issue numbers and the seemingly impenetrable plot lines implied therein. Over on Amazing and Peter Parker, we seek to create a place that says, start here, and at the same time, here create an adjacent place that says, get all the background you need here, and do the latter without forking out big bucks for back issues or even reprints."
After much debate and anticipation, the first issue of Spider-Man Chapter 1 hit shelves in October of 1998. Being the only mainline Spidey title released that month, readers flocked to discover just exactly how Byrne would usher in this new era for the character, and whether this back-to-basics reset could actually rejuvenate Marvel's flagship hero. Before we continue, I just want to take a quick moment and remind you that this video and every video on the channel is brought to you by patreon.com/Owen Likes Comics. If you'd like to support my work, get early access to each new video, and special bonus videos every month, consider signing up for just $1 per month. I'll leave links in the description and the pinned comment, or just go to patreon.com/Owen Likes Comics. Thanks for all of your support, and let's get back to the video. The debut issue of Spider-Man Chapter 1 both reintroduces us to the world of Peter Parker, but also sets out the tone, style and direction that John Byrne took when reimagining Spider-Man's formative years. Much like how Byrne had noted in interviews, this title aimed to retell the character's origin for a new generation of readers, while still retaining the core of Lee and Ditko's classic comics, serving instead as a modernisation of the original stories with some notable changes. This approach is perfectly encapsulated in issue 1, which begins with Peter, already Spider-Man, narrating his origin story to the reader. He recounts being adopted by Uncle Ben and Aunt May after his parents' disappearance, excelling at school as a science prodigy, and attending a science expo held by Dr. Otto Octavius. This demonstration goes horribly wrong though, when a spider enters the containment field and causes a large explosion. Peter is bitten by the now irradiated spider, while the metal arms are fused to Octavius's body. Peter is taken to hospital and, upon recovering, discovers that he's developed superpowers. He then begins wrestling and performing on late night television, creating the Spider-Man costume to hide his identity. One night though, Peter suits up and exits his bedroom window, only to be discovered by a passerby. This man, who previously encountered Uncle Ben, helping him take home a large computer, believes Spidey to be a fellow criminal and decides to rob the house. As such, Peter returns home that evening to discover that Uncle Ben was shot and killed during a home invasion, with the gunman proclaiming that he was tipped off by Spider-Man. Overwhelmed by guilt and rage, Peter dons his costume and searches all of New York for the killer. For anyone at all familiar with Spider-Man stories, be they in comics, live action, or animation, this issue will feel incredibly familiar. Much of its plot is adapted directly from Amazing Fantasy 15, with the Otto Octavius subplot being inspired by his first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man number 3. Although Byrne's tale follows the overall narrative of these classic stories, the writer does attempt to update several aspects of Peter's world. Despite Byrne's art retaining much of Ditko's original look for Peter, the other characters and settings feel unmistakably 1990s, while changes like Uncle Ben meeting his killer when buying a home computer are designed to firmly ground this story in the present day. Despite these attempts though, this issue overall feels decently made but unessential, sticking too closely to the original stories to be distinct, and the few notable changes that Byrne does make largely feel like overcomplicated and unnecessary additions to the hero's canon. These problems are prevalent throughout the entire series, but many of my problems with Chapter 1 are on display here in its first outing. Issue 2, for example, borrows much of its plot from Amazing Spider-Man issue 1, focusing on Spider-Man's first encounter with the Chameleon and his attempt to join the Fantastic Four. This comic does offer a few interesting changes though, such as establishing that the Chameleon is a Latverian spy working for Doctor Doom, and introducing Mary Jane Watson far earlier than in the original stories, depicting her as Peter's next door neighbour, who witnesses him changing into his costume. Likewise, issue 3 retells events from Amazing Spider-Man number 2 and 3, focusing on the hero's first meeting with the Vulture and Peter getting a job at the Daily Bugle. Otto Octavius also resurfaces in this issue, being driven mad after the mechanical arms are fused to his body, and becomes the villainous Dr. Octopus. This issue ends with Otto fighting and defeating Spidey. The pair continue their battle, while Flash Thompson, Peter's longtime bully and now a huge Spider-Man fan, obtains a Spidey costume and masquerades as the Wall Crawler, before being mistakenly kidnapped by Doctor Doom. Peter, with the help of the Fantastic Four, saves Flash from Doom in issue 5, with that comic also introducing the Lizard. Drawing inspiration from Amazing Spider-Man issues 5 through 6, this story sees J. Jonah Jameson discover photos of a mysterious creature in the sewers, causing Peter to investigate and being forced to save a woman and child from this monster. He eventually discovers that the Lizard is actually Dr. Kirk Connors, and the people he was targeting are his family. Dr. Connors is saved and ultimately returns to his human form in issue 6, with that comic also marking the reintroduction of Electro. Whereas most villains depicted in Chapter 1 retain their classic designs, Byrne significantly reworked Electro's costume, replacing his iconic green and yellow outfit with a sleek electric blue design that feels like a precursor to his ultimate counterpart. This story is inspired from the events of Amazing Spider-Man number 9, and sees Electro attack the Daily Bugle, with Jameson mistakenly claiming it was Spider-Man, leading to a fight between the Web Slinger and the Human Torch. While the first 6 issues were all released monthly, the next installment broke from the title's usual format. The following month's entry was a special issue 0 one-shot, a collection of short anthology-style stories retelling the origin of 3 Spider-Man villains, the Vulture, the Lizard, and the Sandman. These origins don't deviate massively from the characters' original versions, with Sandman's backstory mostly being taken from Amazing Spider-Man issue 4, while Lizard's built off his prior appearance in Chapter 1 and his introduction in Amazing Spider-Man issue 6. Interestingly, although the Vulture debuted in Amazing Spider-Man issue 4, the character's full origin wasn't revealed until many years later, in 1983's Amazing Spider-Man 241. Nevertheless, issue 7 resumes the book's ongoing narrative and picks up with Spider-Man ending his fight with Electro, where we discover that the villain was hired by Norman Osborn. Peter is then framed for a series of high-profile robberies orchestrated by Quentin Beck, a former special effects wizard also working for Osborn, who adopts the name of Mysterio. Mysterio's illusions catch the attention of J. Jonah Jameson, whose coverage of the robberies in the Daily Bugle turned public sentiment against the web-slinger. The issue ends with Spider-Man confronting Mysterio, only to be trapped inside of a maze, forced to question his own perception of reality and his sanity. Not only does this story retell the events of Amazing Spider-Man issues 9 and 13, but in my opinion it also highlights a major structural problem that became apparent with Chapter 1. Once the series got underway, Byrne frequently began introducing new villains mid-issue, with each comic having a cliffhanger ending, only to be resolved in the next installment's first half, before then introducing yet another new villain. Although this format kept the book interesting at first, by this point in the run it begins to feel quite formulaic and contrived, with each issue having an insufficient resolution that would be quickly wrapped up in order to start the next one. Case in point, issue 8 begins with Peter escaping Mysterio's trap and apprehending Quentin Beck, only to be later targeted by the Green Goblin. While Norman Osborn has been teased throughout the series as a shadowy figure bankrolling several villains, it's here where Byrne fully introduces him as Spider-Man's arch-nemesis. Taking influence from Amazing Spider-Man issues 13 through 14, Osborn hires a film production company to shoot an action movie in the New Mexico desert. Peter signs up for the shoot, needing money to pay for Aunt May's growing debt, only to be ambushed by the Goblin. The ensuing fight between them leads them both to a nearby cave, where they stumble upon none other than the Incredible Hulk. After a three-way fight, Osborn flees the scene and Peter is able to escape, though aware that his new nemesis remains at large. The next installment continues the book's theme of showcasing not only Spider-Man's first meeting with several villains, but also other Marvel heroes, with issue 9 retelling Peter's first team-up with Daredevil. This comic also reintroduces Kraven the Hunter, who comes to New York after Spider-Man defeated the Chameleon, his half-brother, in issue 2, seeking to get revenge and capture the hero as a trophy. While many of these issues so far follow a similar tone, formula and structure, Byrne would attempt to take the book in a somewhat darker direction, beginning with issue 10. Based around the plot of Amazing Spider-Man issue 17, this comic sees the Green Goblin return to New York and systematically take over the criminal underworld. Meanwhile, Peter is experiencing a crisis of confidence, with his personal and school life suffering due to being Spider-Man, while Aunt May struggles with both her health and mounting debt following Uncle Ben's death. These plots converge when Flash Thompson organises a Spider-Man fan club event, which is gatecrashed by the Green Goblin. Peter arrives soon after, and the two have a brutal exchange that is interrupted when Peter learns that Aunt May has been rushed to hospital. This news causes him to abandon the fight and race across the city to save his aunt, while the media frames Spider-Man as a coward and a fraud for not stopping the Green Goblin. This comic therefore ends in quite somber fashion, with Spider-Man's reputation in ruins as Peter stoically sits at Aunt May's bedside. This darker tone would remain throughout the final two entries of Chapter 1. Issue 11, for instance, begins with Peter still at the hospital, questioning whether or not to continue on as Spider-Man. As he swings throughout the city to clear his mind, he's confronted by Giant Man and the Wasp, who believe that Spider-Man has been planning to attack them, leading to a fight as a confused Peter tries to explain. Eventually, the trio deduce that someone has misled Hank and Janet into believing that Spider-Man is a threat. Realising this scheme was concocted by none other than Egghead. Spidey, Giant Man and the Wasp then confront Egghead before Peter returns to his everyday life. The issue concludes with him at the Daily Bugle, becoming increasingly frustrated at Jameson's smear campaign. He returns home, throws off his costume, and declares that Spider-Man has only made his life worse, and effectively quits. These events build up to Byrne's narrative climax with issue 12, where Peter brings Aunt May home from the hospital and resumes his ordinary civilian life. Spider-Man's sudden disappearance is celebrated by the likes of Jameson, while other heroes like Daredevil, the Fantastic Four and the Avengers all empathise with Peter's decision. Despite much of the world accepting that Spider-Man is gone, Norman Osborn plots to bring the web-slinger back so he can defeat him once and for all. To do this, he recruits his cousin Flint Marko, aka the Sandman, to track down the web-slinger. Peter actually catches Sandman first, while out trying to restart Spidey's TV career, now needing money to pay Aunt May's medical bills. He reluctantly battles Marko, only to be soundly outmatched, with Spider-Man's mask being ripped off during the fight. Ashamed, Peter flees into an alley and changes back into his regular clothes, leaving the scene undetected but embarrassed. When he returns home, he finds Aunt May awake and watching TV, as J. Jonah Jameson broadcasts Spider-Man's failure to the world. May nods and agrees, enraging Peter and making him determined to prove everyone wrong, suiting up once more to take the Sandman down. The pair then have another fight, which ends with Spider-Man trapping the villain inside an industrial-strength vacuum cleaner. With Spidey officially back, the public rejoices and Jameson's smear campaign falls apart, with Chapter 1 ending with a final heroic swing where Peter affirms his duty to protect others, remembering that with great power also comes great responsibility. Spider-Man Chapter 1 ended its 13-issue run in August of 1999. In addition to retelling the hero's origin for a new generation, the series also served as part of Byrne and writer Howard Mackey's relaunch of Amazing Spider-Man, which had begun in November of 1998. In terms of sales, while precise data is difficult to find, Wizard magazine noted in issue 103 that the title didn't sell as well as Marvel had hoped. John Byrne, however, claimed that the book's sales were strong enough for Marvel to consider greenlighting a follow-up series, though he rejected the idea. Either way, Chapter 1 seemed to split the opinion of fans and critics upon its release. Some appreciated Byrne's attempts to update Peter Parker's origin, while others lamented the retconning of Lee and Ditko's classic stories, as well as the recent work of Kurt Busiek in Untold Tales of Spider-Man. In my opinion, these critiques aren't unwarranted. My biggest issue with Chapter 1 is that it can't decide whether it's an ambitious reboot or a faithful retelling of the classic Spider-Man stories. It refuses to change too much, yet makes so many small and unnecessary retcons. What purpose does making Norman Osborn and the Sandman related serve, besides trying to explain why they have similar hairstyles? Ironically, a better version of what Byrne intended to do here was already done with Busiek's Untold Tales, with that series weaving the new stories into the existing fabric of what Stan Lee, Steve Ditko and John Romita had already created. As a standalone series, Chapter 1 is fine but forgettable, but as an updated replacement of Spidey's origin story, it's both too safe and too contrived to actually work. Nevertheless though, Chapter 1 was a big part of Marvel's plans to relaunch Spider-Man at the tail end of the 1990s. Many of the series' changes and updates to Peter's mythos were reflected in other in-continuity books of the time. The best example of this is Byrne and Howard Mackey's run on Amazing Spider-Man, which made frequent callbacks to this revised origin. For example, the debut issue directly references Peter's fight with the Fantastic Four, while the reappearance of the Sinister Six in issue 12 not only featured many of the villains used in Chapter 1, but included the specific redesigns that Byrne did for characters like Electro and the Vulture. Even non-Spidey books initially tried to reflect these changes. Peter's revised origin, being bitten by the spider during a lab explosion caused by Otto Octavius, was referenced in Daredevil issue 2 by Kevin Smith and Joe Quesada. However, Chapter 1 didn't remain Spider-Man's canonical backstory for very long. While Howard Mackey wrote Amazing for 29 issues, with Byrne illustrating the first 18, the sweeping changes to the Wallcrawler's backstory would be retconned almost immediately after their departure. According to longtime Marvel editor Tom Brevoort, many in the company were dissatisfied with the alterations made to Spider-Man's mythos, and as soon as new creatives took over the characters' titles, the original version of these stories were recanonized. Eventually, in 2005's official Handbook of the Marvel Universe Alternate Universes, the Chapter 1 continuity was formally designated as Earth 98121, officially separating it from the mainline Peter Parker and leaving it as its own standalone attempt at modernizing Marvel's flagship hero. Interestingly, Tom Brevoort shared an email that he sent to then Marvel Editor-in-Chief Bob Harras during Chapter 1's run. He suggested that if Marvel sought to make more books in this vein, they should consider setting them in a separate continuity. This feels incredibly pertinent given that only a year after Chapter 1 ended, Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Bagley launched Ultimate Spider-Man, a new ongoing series that reinvented Peter Parker for the new millennium, set within the brand new Ultimate Universe. In a way, Byrne's series can be viewed as a first draft for Ultimate Spider-Man, attempting a similar premise and giving Bendis a roadmap to follow, along with knowledge of what works and what doesn't. Upon its release in September of 2000, Ultimate Spider-Man was a huge success, and the ensuing Ultimate Universe was a big part of Marvel's commercial rejuvenation throughout the early 2000s. In addition to this, the 2000s were in general a period of renewed focus for the wall crawler. While Byrne inherited a Spider-Man that felt tired and in need of new direction, the new millennium not only saw Bendis breathe new life into the character through Ultimate, but also the likes of J. Michael Straczynski, who took over Amazing Spider-Man in 2001, penning a 6-year run that remains a high point in the character's modern history, alongside Paul Jenkins' tenure on Peter Parker and Mark Millar's Marvel Knight series. Coupled with this, the success of Sam Raimi's 2002 live-action movie brought Spider-Man back to the height of mainstream popular culture, and these successes only helped to make Chapter 1 fade further into obscurity. Overall, while I don't think Spider-Man Chapter 1 is a bad series in itself, it certainly failed to meet its intended expectations. For a comic designed to reset Spider-Man and bring readers back to his stories, it instead became a cautionary tale of how not to reboot a beloved character, serving as a useful guide for future creators to craft their new takes on the hero. Although that obviously wasn't its intended purpose, I do think it ultimately served an important role in shaping Spider-Man's resurgence throughout the turn of the century, just not in the way that both Marvel and John Byrne had expected. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to leave a like on this video and leave a comment down below as well. Let me know your thoughts on everything we talked about in today's video. I can't wait to hear what you have to say as always. If you're new to Owen Likes Comics, please make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notify bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. And if you enjoyed this and you want some more, there should be some other videos on screen right now that you might also enjoy. If you want to help support the channel and help me make more videos, you can do so by going over to patreon.com/OwenLikesComics. Or if you want some more of me, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram and Blue Sky, just at Owen Likes Comics. But that's all for this video. Again, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully I will see you next time. But until then, take care and keep reading.